Picture this. You're scrolling through listings and suddenly a photo stops you in your tracks. The light is perfect, the room looks spacious, and you can almost imagine yourself living there. That's the power of great real estate photography. Now imagine being the one who takes those photos. In the next few minutes, I'll show you how to capture images that make buyers fall in love at first sight. No more dark, cramped shots or weird angles, just stunning photos that sell homes. Let's talk about the equipment you need for real estate photography. Now, you might think you need to spend thousands on fancy gear, but that's not true. I've seen photographers lug around $5,000 setups, only to struggle in tight spaces and produce mediocre results. Here's the surprising truth. A $1,000 setup can often outperform more expensive gear in real estate photography, because in this niche, versatility and practicality trump raw power. So what's the secret weapon for stunning interior shots? Basic 16 to 35 millimeter wide lens. This lens is a game changer. It captures more of the room without distorting the edges, making spaces look open and inviting. I've used both high-end, budget-friendly wide-angle lenses, and let me tell you, the difference in image quality is barely noticeable in the real-world scenarios. Let's break down the 3 core pieces of equipment you actually need. First, your camera body. Whether you're a full frame or crop sensor, both can produce great results. I've shot with entry-level DSLRs and gotten photos that impressed even the pickiest real estate agent. Second, that wide-angle lens we've talked about. It's your bread and butter for interiors. And third, a sturdy tripod. This is non-negotiable. It keeps your shot steady and consistent, even when you're dealing with low light situations. I want to show you some real examples. These photos were taken with a basic Canon Rebel, a budget 10 to 18 millimeter lens, and a $50 tripod. Look how crisp and inviting they are. The rooms look spacious, the colors pop, and the details are clear. This proves you don't need top-of-the-line gear to get professional results. You've got the gear, but now it's time to unlock the real secret sauce of real estate photography, your camera settings. Most photographers mess up the 3 critical settings, turning what could be stunning spaces into dark, uninviting photos that buyers scroll. Let's start with the biggest culprit, exposure. I've seen countless real estate photos where rooms look like caves, or worse, washed out and bland. This mistake screams amateur and can cost you clients. But don't worry, I'm going to show you how to nail your exposure every time. Here's the game changer. Set your aperture to f8. This magic number gives you the perfect balance of sharpness and depth. At f8, everything in the foreground to background stays crisp and clear, making rooms look their best. I've tested every f-stop, and trust me, f8 is the sweet spot for real estate. Now here's a pro tip that'll save you tons of time. Shoot in aperture priority mode. This lets your camera do the heavy lifting by automatically adjusting the shutter speed based on your chosen aperture. You'll work faster without sacrificing quality. Just keep an eye on that exposure compensation dial to avoid any surprises. But what about those tricky rooms with bright windows and dark corners? That's where HDR comes in. HDR stands for High Dynamic Range, and it's the technique that'll make your photos pop. Here's how it works. You take 5 shots of the same scene at different exposures, usually 2 stops apart, and this captures everything from the deepest shadows to the brightest highlights. For ISO, stick between ISO 100 and 400. This keeps noise to a minimum, especially in those darker rooms. And if you're shooting in really dim space, don't be afraid to bump it up to ISO 400 to speed up your bracketing. One last tip, use a remote shutter or a 2-second delay timer. This might seem small, but it makes a huge difference in keeping your images sharp, especially when you're doing HDR brackets. Now that we've dialed in our camera settings, let's talk about composition, the real game changer in real estate photography. Did you know that most buyers scroll past the photos in under 2 seconds? That's right, you've got the blink of an eye to grab their attention. So let's dive into the composition rules that make your photos impossible to ignore. First, let's tackle some common mistakes that make rooms look smaller than they actually are. One of the biggest culprits, your tripod height. Here's the secret. Set the tripod to waist level. It's the sweet spot that gives you a balanced view of the room, capturing both the floor and the ceiling. That's just right. Trust me, this simple adjustment will make your spaces look way more inviting. Next, let me introduce you to the 2-wall rule. This is a game changer for those rectangular rooms that can be tricky to photograph. By showing 2 walls in your shot, you instantly create a sense of depth. It's like giving the viewer a 3D tour of the space, making it feel larger and more welcoming. I use this technique in almost every room I shoot, and the results speak for themselves. Now here's a cheap camera trick that'll make your rooms look bigger instantly. Shoot from the corners. It's that simple. By positioning yourself in a corner, you can capture a wider perspective of the room, and this technique is especially powerful in smaller spaces like bathrooms or tight bedrooms. Give it a try, and you'll be amazed at how more spacious your rooms appear. Let's talk about handling mirrors and reflective surfaces. These can be a real headache if you're not careful. The key is to position yourself strategically to avoid capturing your own reflection. Sometimes you might need to get creative with your angles or plan for some editing work later. But with a little practice, you'll be handling these tricky surfaces like a pro. I want to give you a quick room-by-room shot list to make sure you're covering all your bases. For bedrooms, aim for 2 shots. Most bathrooms, 1's good enough. You only need 1 good angle. But kitchens and living rooms usually require 3 or 4 shots to showcase their full potential. And remember, when shooting, keep those verticals straight. It's crucial to make your images look professional and avoid that distorted look that screams amateur hour. We've covered a lot of ground, and now you're armed with the 5 key techniques that transform your real estate photos from amateur to pro. Let's recap. Essential equipment that won't break the bank, camera settings that make rooms pop, composition rules that sell houses, and lighting secrets that bring spaces to life. Remember, it's not about having the fanciest gear, it's about mastering these fundamentals. Take a look at these before and after shots. See how properly exposed, well-composed images on the right make the room much more appealing. That's the power of these techniques in action. It's the difference between a listing that goes scrolled past and one that stops a buyer in their tracks. Don't feel overwhelmed. If this seems like a lot to take in, start with 1 technique, maybe work on your composition and dial in those camera settings. Practice it and become second nature, then move on to the next. Before you know it, you'll be capturing photos that make real estate agents fight over your services. Remember, great real estate photography isn't about pretty pictures, it's about showcasing spaces in a way that people envision their future homes. With these techniques in your toolkit, you're not just taking photos, you're helping dreams come true, 1 shot at a time.